is one person.
Right, right.
Babysitting the entire world. So there's that one guy that's like, hey, I just want to make sure it doesn't go crazy.
Yeah. Now you're asking a hard question, right? This is this long-term prediction thing. I mean, for sure, I think a lot of folks in the field would like the world where we don't have to. I'm yet to see a complex system where you don't need babysitting. I'm always worried about saying never about, I don't know of an example of a complex system that doesn't need people for edge cases. I'm thinking of the canonical example of something like airplane flying. I mean, airplanes mostly fly themselves now,
Yep.
but you still need pilots because
Yeah.
there's going to be edge cases.
Sanmi Koyejo, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Stanford, founder of Virtue AI, and author of an upcoming book on machine learning from human preferences. He grew up in Lagos. We actually went to the same high school and trained at the same boxing gym in Austin. He built his career across UT Austin, Google, UIUC, and now Stanford. In our discussion, we talk about why humans will always be in the loop with AI systems, what calibrated trust actually means, and how serendipity shapes every career that truly matters.
All the thing I love is the algorithmic, like that's the thing that, I'm most excited about. I'll confess as an academic, this is the thing I'm excited about. The things that have led to meaningful, significant outcome are a combination of data and engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering in a sense of, so I say this a lot to a bunch of my PhD students. I mean, in terms of making money, in terms of like most of the obvious signals for career success, you're probably better off actually not doing a PhD and not being a researcher. I think you should do research if you value the exploration process, because I think you do a lot of that, and you do a lot of that in a way where you won't there'll be long periods where you don't get signal that you're going in a good direction.
Yeah.
You have to be resilient to the fact that there's no.
Before we go deep in this conversation, quick ask. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on a podcast app, please follow. This conversation is one of many that are shaping a book I'm writing on how we find meaning as we go deeper into the automation and intelligence era. It's called Practice Ground, and the book is coming later this year, 2026. Don't miss it. Now, back to our interview. Sanmi Koyejo, thank you for joining me today. Just to give a background, you're assistant professor computer science at Stanford University. You also lead the Stanford Trustworthy AI Research, STARE, founder, chief AI officer at Virtue AI. A lot, there's so many things we could talk about. And I think you're also writing a book on machine learning from human preferences.
That's correct.
So thank you for joining today.
Excited. Looking forward to the talk.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, before we get into some of the deep topics, like I just want to share a story of, Sanmi and I were in Austin. we spent more time together in a boxing gym in Austin,
right.
Texas. You remember that?
I do.
Bruce boxing.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, it's been a very long time, but we'll check that up.
Man, that gym really is really part of like my Austin story. Like it was literally like this garage turned into a gym that we all used to go to after work. You probably after doing research on campus.
Yes, yeah. Many hours there.
Many hours in that
Bruce is
gym.
a character. I think it's
My
a
God.
unique person. He's
Yeah.
incredible, but such a fun character.
And I remember, to be honest, like just moving to Austin from, I just finished my master's at Texas A&M, moved to Austin, looking for things to do, joined this gym. I first went to like one of those fancy boxing gyms, and I was like, and then I came to this one and, no AC, grimy, like the Bruce just yelling at people, right?
It's like a textbook video movie version of a boxing gym.
Exactly.
All the stereotypes are there.
Yeah. And I remember you in particular, like, I think I saw you on this like speed bag, right?
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And you were going fast. I was like, damn, this guy can box, right? And later on, I was like, wait, did you go to ISL?
Yeah,
and then just to go reverse a bit, we actually went to we're in the same high school in Lagos,
Yes.
International School of Lagos. I was in your brother's class,
Yes.
Simi's
There
class.
you go.
So we go way back, man.
Way, way
Austin,
back.
Lagos. Yeah.
Your memory is better than mine. Now, once you say it, I'm like, oh, all these memories are flooding back very quickly. But yeah, and I haven't talked to Bruce in a while. We used to be actually quite close, and I spent an
Yeah,
incredible amount of time in that gym.
man.
So
No, that
that
gym
was
was
like
like
escape for me while
it
I was
was definitely an escape. Bruce, at some point, Bruce even gave me
key.
the key. I'm sure you had the key
Yeah,
also.
I had a
You
key at
can
some
go
point.
anytime. It's like come in anytime. Just make sure you lock the door.
Yeah, and it was incredible. You really treated us like, you know,
Yeah. So okay. So tell me. So you finished from Austin. You're doing your PhD out there.
yes.
Mhm. Postdoc in Stanford. We just talked about it a bit. You did something. You kind of had different things between industry, going into research,
Mhm.
Urbana-Champaign, some Google in the mix. But now you're back in
That's
Stanford.
correct. Yeah, finished it for about 3 years and change now.
Nice. So, as I was getting ready for this conversation, I was looking at some of the stuff you've already talked about. And one thing that I spent some time listening to was this talk that you did about like AI measurements,
Mhm.
right? Benchmarks and building out effective systems. And, you know, even for myself, as I've gone through this process, being that we know that AI is something that is based on probability, right? So you kind of just want to, if you're ever building it, you want to kind of have like this effective way of
Mhm.
making sure it's giving you good and better results. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the importance of like benchmarks, measurements in AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, AI is a quantitative field. It's mostly experimental. Most of the work, I mean, there are different ways to distill what the field has done and achieved, and the guiding light of the work. If you talk to people, it's about building intelligence and matching or exceeding human intelligence. If you talk to some other people, it's about building tools and software that's useful for people that can automate different kinds of tasks. All these things are true to different extents and also differ across people. But I think the actual thing that the field has been good at is, give me some metric of performance of something, and I'll figure out how to make that number get bigger. I mean, in some ways, a lot of the world is built around this. There's an adage
Mm-hmm.
in business that what you can't measure, you can't improve. People
Yep.
talk about
Yep.
stuff like this. So I think measurement shows up everywhere as a big part of any kind of, I mean, at least definitely automated systems, engineering systems, but often even human systems. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it really anchors strongly for any field that's highly experimental, that also has meaningful resource investments. People
Yeah.
care about the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Measurements in the field used to play a very narrow role. It used to be people who were trying to figure out better deep learning architectures, better data sets. And so most of the work on measurement was, can we get some signal about, whether we're making good choices, how to make things better? So
Mm-hmm.
very famously, there was a big revolution in the field when one of my colleagues, Feifei Li,
Yep.
developed this data set called ImageNet
Yep.
that allowed for new ways of capturing, complicated data distribution. So understanding all the different ways that we could look at computer vision data sets for this task of recognizing objects. A lot of the work there was compiling these data sets and actually getting some meaningful signal about what good image recognition could look like. But really, it led to this revolution where people could then come together and build tools to do a
Mm-hmm.
much better job than anything that had come before for improving this number of how well are you doing image recognition.
Got it. Got it.
This is this benchmark thing, this thing that
Yeah.
on
And
it.
in your work, right? I
Yeah.
think one thing I've learned is a lot of people they get so carried away by, AI and, the top level and everything. But from what I've seen working with other people in the field, there's a lot of work that just goes into like, as you said, putting the data set together and the data
Yep.
engineering. What percentage of your work is doing that work that nobody really sees, where you're
Yeah.
just kind of gathering data
Yeah.
versus the actual analytics and
I mean, percentage is hard. Let me just finish a brief thought from the last thing.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that has changed on measurement is that the world the AI has become much more important. It used to be, again, this, insular academic discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, it's just become a bigger and bigger component of resource investment and policymaking and things like that. And so these numbers that used to be really for internal consumption have become important numbers for people to make decisions in the field. When OpenAI or Google gets a new model, they trumpet benchmark numbers, they trumpet
Yep.
numbers in the arena. And I think in that talk and in a lot of my work, the gap that we're seeing is that the reason we were building measurement systems before and the kinds of work that we did don't actually answer the call for what measurement is required to do now, which is like help us make decisions in the real world where we're interpreting the actual number.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those numbers were not built to be interpreted. They were built to just sort of roughly tell us, are we doing better or worse?
Yep.
So there's a big gap there that a lot of my technical research work is trying to figure out how to.
Figure out. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So your question on the data, huge, extremely important. Arguably, academia is very biased towards the algorithmic side of things. Some of this is changing, but in many ways, the sexy part of the field is for a long time was I built some new algorithm. It
Mm-hmm.
shifted a little bit. I think now it's a maybe less I build an algorithm, but I can solve some interesting task that
Okay.
we weren't
Uh-huh.
considered before. But the core of modern machine learning and AI is data curation.
Mm-hmm.
Way underappreciated. For any project that's successful in terms of resource investment and outcome, I mean, it's hard to put numbers, but easily over 80%.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd argue, okay, again, in real time, you're putting me on the spot a little bit.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's all good.
While the thing I love is the algorithmic, like that's the thing that, I'm most excited about. I'll confess as an academic, this is the thing
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about. The things that have led to meaningful, significant outcome are a combination of data and engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering in a sense of like, how do we scale up systems? So a lot of the success of Google, OpenAI, many of these places is that, it's one thing to have compute, it's another to figure out how to compute can scale
Mm-hmm.
at, world level,
Yep.
solve these really like incredibly complicated, incredibly resource intensive kinds of tasks. And
Problems. Yeah.
part of the solution is just throw money at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you also need incredible engineers who are nitty gritty on details that we often don't teach actually because they feel like details. But if you talk to
Yeah.
anyone who's built a rail system and any of the work that we've done in building rail systems, those details on the engineering side, on like how to
Mm-hmm.
put together play such a big role. So if you put me in a corner to put a number, I'd say despite what I love, the actual thing is maybe, 50% data,
Mm-hmm.
40% engineering, 10% the stuff that we actually teach in our
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
And it's not that it's not important, is
Yep.
that, we have the rough, rules of the road on how to make progress,
Mm-hmm.
and what has actually led to meaningful advancement. But a lot of the nitty gritty has
Yeah.
contributed a lot, and
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
engineering and data components.
Okay. And so, when you think about like debugging a complex system, which is what you literally do day to day, right? What does your intuition tell you that you can't necessarily see in the data? Like, how much of your intuition do you bring into your work?
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things, I'll flip the question a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because actually, because of, I mean, I'm going to ascribe intention to mechanism where I'm not completely sure. The thing that I observe though is that people actually don't look at the data nearly enough and actually rely a little bit too much on intuition
Mm-hmm.
to debug systems. Again, this is maybe a good idea for many things, but for systems that are primarily engineering empirical systems, which is again most of what the AI world
Yep.
actually is, it really does matter that you take a meaningful look.
Mm-hmm.
We trumpet algorithmic automation, but really it's people behind these things. It's people that are part of the data labeling and data curation.
Yeah.
It's people that are part of the engineering building and carefully looking at data artifacts to make sure that things make sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's an incredible amount of humanness
Yeah.
behind advances. I think the narrative is not nearly as cool when you say, it's people, human decision making.
Mm-hmm.
The automation narrative is much more compelling, and I think is what we hear the most.
Yeah.
You really do need, if you go to any successful system that's out there, things break. We don't yet have good, completely automated tools to know what might be broken. To
Mhm.
give you a simple, like one example, whenever you're training any of these really large neural network systems, the thing you're typically tracking is some notion of error. So, like how
Mhm.
often the models are making mistakes for the classic task of next word prediction. So,
Yeah.
as some of the audience might know, as you might know, a lot of the core of large, successful modern AI systems, this thing's called transformers,
Mhm.
is this task of trying to predict the next word in a
Next
sequence of
word.
words.
Yep.
That's sort of the key
Or
underlying
token.
technology
Yep.
that makes things to work.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, yes, the token is the real thing.
Yep.
It's easier to talk about.
Yeah, I know, it's easier to say the word. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
But if you build a real system, what you'll see is that, you know, as you apply the optimization tools that we have, the error gets better, better, better over time, and then suddenly it'll just spike, and like there's no explanation for it. And the only way to actually figure out what's going on, so this is actually very common. So much of building, the reason why people pay so much for top engineers is actually you need to babysit these systems quite
This
a bit.
yeah.
It's underappreciated, but it's not, turnkey, set something, walk away. You're spending a lot of time looking at the system behavior over time.
Mhm.
You're like tracking logs, you're tracking sort of, outcomes, outputs, all that stuff. If you
Mhm.
don't do that, your system will be crap.
Yeah.
And you don't yet know a way to avoid you doing this.
Yeah.
Right now, so much of the process is human. So
Mhm.
your point about intuition, yes, intuition plays a huge role. Often for success, the way intuition comes in is actually a lot in this mix of intuition and data analysis.
Yeah.
So again, we haven't found ways to fully automate this process of
Mhm.
building complex systems. So actually looking at logs, looking at data, forming intuition for why there might be mistakes and errors. So one example that people have, over time we talk to engineers, something that happens, one of the reasons why the error might spike is that you might be looking at data from Reddit, and then someone put up, um, I don't know, like a garbage blog post that's all S's or all A's,
Mhm.
like information content free, spam essentially. Maybe they put it up as a joke or a placeholder, but if
Mhm.
you're just grabbing data from the internet, you missed this and this ended up in your data set. Or it's a list of emails, something that's very far from, conversational text,
Yep.
and the system has to, try to figure out how to train and predict the next word on something that's garbage, and it
Yeah.
just throws the system out of whack. And if you're not looking at your data, all you see is the system, the training process is broken, you have no idea what
Mhm.
happened.
Mhm.
Over time you get experience in looking at logs to get intuition for like some of the common failure modes and what might
Got it.
break. And so a
Yep.
lot of debugging in modern MLAI ends up looking a lot like, data debugging things.
Yeah.
The way you build intuition is really like you find common patterns over cycles
Mhm.
of things that are happening.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my work, what we're hoping to do is maybe come up with automated evaluation systems that can, again, I think it's okay. And, for a while that these things are much more manual than advertised.
Mhm.
I think we'd like to democratize what it might look like to build
Yeah.
world-class systems. And I think that path there includes some tooling for measuring
Tooling, yeah.
out of behavior
Mhm.
things.
It's interesting you said that. I had a conversation, similar conversation with my professor from Texas A&M, right?
Oh, cool.
And he's at RPI now and doing data science, particularly for systems, biological systems, right? And I gave him this example, like when I used to work at Rockwell, where we used to implement like neural networks at factories, right? We had this thing that when everything is at steady state, everything is all good, right? Everything is going well, everybody's relaxing until some random stuff happens. And then you see the spike
Magic.
and everybody's panicking and the model is now just going crazy. At this point, we have to turn it off. And then that experienced operator just runs out and says, "Oh,
Yes.
you know, this valve was open and we need to change it every other 3 months." So they call maintenance and maintenance comes in but it's the experience
Yes.
of that person
Exactly this.
that
Yes.
kind of jumps in
It
and this kind
matters
of
so much.
Mhm.
And, again, we tell the story about automation, but experience plays such a big role in complex systems because
Yeah.
we haven't yet figured out a better way to build in these kinds of intuitions.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you could, in your example, you could figure out and nail the issue, but that's 6 months of work or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You're testing every single thing to figure out
Yep.
what's going wrong.
Yeah.
Where if you have someone who has built experience over time and they have the right intuition,
Mm-hmm.
they get it,
Yeah.
right away, or it can point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
Do you
yeah,
think
this is an important point.
yeah. Do you think there's always going to be a world where we still have to babysit the automated systems? Do you
Yeah,
think 50 years from now, 60, 70, 80, regardless of what we build, there's still going to be some form of babysitting, even if it's just I'm just sitting here and making sure
yeah, yeah.
even if it's one person
Right, right.
babysitting the entire world, so there's that one guy that's like, hey, I just want to make sure it doesn't go crazy.
Yeah. Now you're asking a hard question, right? This is this long-term prediction thing. I mean, for sure, I think a lot of folks in the field would like the world where we don't have to. I'm yet to see a complex system where you don't need babysitting. I'm always worried about saying never about anything because
Yeah.
the world is what it is. But just for an example, the answer to your question, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Other than I don't know of an example of a complex system that doesn't need people
Yeah.
for edge cases. I'm thinking of the canonical example of something like airplane flying. I mean, airplanes mostly fly themselves now,
Yep.
but you still need pilots because
Yeah.
there's going to be edge cases of something that goes wrong or
Mm-hmm.
some parts of the system where something about the human way of thinking and ability to problem solve and experience to know failure modes is key to finding solutions in reasonable amounts of time.
Yeah.
So is it our failure of innovation to come up with some automated approach that gets around this? Maybe. Or is it
Mm-hmm.
just a fundamental component of complex systems that once system gets sufficiently complicated, our automated tools generally are insufficient?
Yeah.
I don't know where to put the bets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a good question, but I'm yet to see a counterexample for
Mm-hmm.
keeping humans in the loop, even
Yeah.
modern, say, AI systems.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me think about this next question where I feel a lot of parts, like those edge cases or whatever it is, sometimes it's experience, sometimes it's just tinkering,
Yeah.
people just playing around and just realize this whole thing. There's some play involved sometimes, even while you're going through this scientific approach of trying to solve a problem. So, what role for you does getting lost in play, right, in your research, how does that impact the way you think about a project? Do you kind of say, hey, let's ask more questions, let's investigate? Or do you kind of go more into that mode of like, just a little investigation and then let's just kind of, we found something, let's
Yeah.
not, will I say exploit it, but
Yeah,
let's move
I think
forward.
I think that's a reasonable explore exploits is a
Mm-hmm.
reasonable analogy for how to think about this, at least to my thinking. So I'll start off by saying I think research is I think a quite privileged place in the world where the incentive is so well aligned with exploration. I think it's harder in business because I get to see both sides now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I say, for the research side, a lot of the long term useful outcome comes from being able to take risks that are non obvious, that
Mm-hmm.
require you to do a bunch more exploration. If something is as straightforward as pure iteration and grinding,
Mm-hmm.
it can still be useful research, but often companies are better at executing at that than most. Like they have more resources, they can just throw at the problem and scale that more efficiently. And in fact, a lot of work that we've been doing around, say, a lot of startup work is because we see a gap where there's some insights, and the thing to do is execute on that gap. And
Mm-hmm.
execution is actually much, much more better done in a company environment. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's one of those reasons why companies also have a love-hate relationship with their research
Yep.
teams.
Yep.
They like the innovation, but it's not always well aligned with company outcomes.
Quarterly goals. Yep.
Yes. So research is really, I mean, if that's something that one values, and not everyone values this the same way, but I
Mm-hmm.
do. And for someone that values this ability to think broadly and just spend time exploring, I think research is this position that I and some small fraction of the world has.
Mm-hmm.
That this is actually the place where you get most of the, or at least the career positive signal comes from
Yeah.
solving hard problems that might take a long time to solve that requires you
Mm-hmm.
to explore. And so I say this a lot to a bunch of my PhD students. I mean, in terms of making money, in terms of like most of the obvious signals for career success, you're probably better off actually not doing a PhD and not being a researcher. I think you should do research if you value the exploration
Mm-hmm.
process, because I think that's, you do a lot of that, and you do a lot of that in a way where you won't get, there'll be long periods where you don't get signal that you're going in a good direction. And
Yeah.
you have to be resilient to the fact that there's no positive feedback for long.
Yep. Yep.
You can call it resilience, you can call it enjoying that part of the exploration. Again, it's not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but if that's not something that you enjoy, I think you'll be frustrated in research.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
like for you, how has it been? Like now you have that research background, right? Now you're also doing virtual AI, right? And I'm of the opinion that researchers can be great at building businesses, particularly for myself as an entrepreneur. Like I've taken this approach of like, okay, you're going to do stuff, it's going to fail. You're
mhm,
going to learn as long as you have that learning mindset of like, what else can we do and reiterate, right? So there's a part of me that thinks like, oh man, there should be more researchers building businesses, right?
yeah,
But that doesn't pan out the way it is, right? When you look at the numbers
yeah,
sometimes. What's do you what have you brought from the research field that you see is very aligned as you're building your business?
yeah. Should there be more researchers building companies? Maybe I'll needle on that a little bit. I mean, high level, yes. I do think there's a very like obvious failure mode for researchers that choose to build companies that one has to be aware of, which is you don't research rewards so much the exploration. So we talked earlier about this exploratory
Yep.
thing. I think it's a mistake to throw away exploration if you switch to building a business. But it's also a mistake to not change the fraction of effort,
Exactly. Yep.
exploration versus execution.
Yep.
So if you don't like exploit, execution is a good
Mm-hmm.
alternative word. And I think a failure mode I've seen some of my colleagues fall into is they forget that the business has different incentives and outcomes tied
Mm-hmm.
to it, and you're running it like you're running your lab, and you're doing pure research, which can be very valuable. And in fact, just to really anchor on this, there are many multi-billion-dollar startups that are purely research in AI.
Research. Yep.
So this is a very unique thing about the
Yep.
AI system. But if the thing you're building is a standard business in the sense that you need customers and you need to make money and all that stuff, then I
Mm-hmm.
think there's value. Researchers can be very good at this because they have the research exploration mindset. But my early sense, some of this is my experience, some of this is talking to
Mm-hmm.
mentors and folks who have done a bunch of this research
Yep.
slash industry in the past, is that the thing you have to do though is find a different balance in
Mm-hmm.
a company execution setting, assuming what you're doing is a standard business, where you are open to exploration and learning, but you care about good execution, making customers happy. Is
Mm-hmm.
the thing that a researcher
Your
is
research.
about. The customers are your community and they care about your work, but there's no execution in that same way.
Mm-hmm.
Software artifacts stop at maybe the version that makes sense in the paper. So it doesn't need to scale, doesn't need to productionize.
Yep.
The UI parts of it can be sloppy
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
often the win is he has a good idea, not necessarily here's how it serves a million or a billion people.
People. Yeah.
Different
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
I would say I also feel extremely fortunate. There are a few universities that are really good about encouraging entrepreneurship, either explicitly or just like it's just such in the ether that it's not
Mm-hmm.
unusual. And I think Stanford is one of those places
For
where,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
I mean, that's why when I was applying to business school, like Stanford was number one,
yeah,
particularly because there was all just the brand like
yes,
of entrepreneurship, right? And this is not an ad for Stanford, by the way. But yes, I do agree that there are just certain places where
it's
a
in the
lot of
air, it's everywhere.
years in the air, exactly. A lot of businesses
Students,
have been
faculty,
built,
has a
exactly. Alumni, all that kind of stuff. So, can you tell me more about trustworthy AI? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, trust is a tricky. I mean, it's one of those things where you're trying to operationalize something about language and really something that's a feeling, which is like so trust is, I find, is valuable to separate. So trust is really human opinion, and trusts in technology broadly is about human opinion about
Mhm.
technology. The place where this matters a lot is trying to build systems where humans have calibrated trust. So what I mean by this is there's a tendency to either overtrust, where you imagine a system can solve many more problems that engage in many more things than it can actually do. And so
Mhm.
you apply it in places where it's not ready and you have some disaster happen. Or under trust, where you just imagine it. So over trusting, I know we talked a bit about AI being very hypey right now.
Yep.
Like, the consequence has been people just assume it can solve every problem. So there's a bit of overtrust issue right now, I
Yep.
think, in
Yep.
AI systems. The under trust version, an example may be, so this is really like assuming the system cannot solve many of the problems that it can actually solve.
Mhm.
Many examples of this, maybe some parts of self-driving, though that one's tricky depending on the specifics. I like to use the example of some of my doctor colleagues. I work quite a bit in AI for healthcare.
Uh-huh.
My experience is that my clinician colleagues are extremely on the like they're very much on the extreme. So there'll
Mhm.
be a couple of people, some fraction of the community that believes AI will solve everything about medicine and immediately is like, bought into everything that you say
Yep.
or anyone says. And then there's some fraction that believes that there's nothing useful about
About the system.
technology.
Yep.
We'll jump on every failure, and there will be some failures, and sort of that becomes the whole narrative.
Mhm.
I mean, the truth is in the middle, not in a generic in the middle sense, but
Yep.
really, I think the goal is trying to find this right calibration. And in the ideal world, the way that society engages technology will be in this calibrated middle where we understand where
Mhm.
technology, where it can work, where it doesn't work, where it's useful, and we calibrate accordingly in where we apply it. So my group tries to engage in this question.
Mhm.
The way that we do this work is we pick a few different aspects that we think will engender trust by people. And we try to build research, conceptual, applied foundations and deployments that can help close this gap.
Yeah.
So these directions look like robustness. What is happening when something changes in the world? How does the system react? This
Mhm.
looks like fairness issues. How does the system behave across different groups, different
Yep.
demographics? Does it work the same for everybody? This looks like privacy issues. Is this
Yep.
leaking data? Are people able to get information from it? This looks like security issues. What is the threat of your system from a bad actor, third party?
Mhm.
So these are very specific directions and this broad notion of what it will take for society to trust AI systems.
Yep.
And what we like to do, the kinds of work research likes to do, is thinking through building both understanding and tooling to help close the gap across these directions
Yeah.
with the hope that this engenders more calibrated trust
Trust. Yeah.
in technology by society, by people.
Mhm. And is the outcome just moving society forward? Because, I think in general, like trust is amongst humans,
Hmm.
trust is like this huge currency, right?
Hmm.
Like you trust your family members and then you trust your neighborhood and then you
Hmm.
trust the bigger community or if you're in the same tribe, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the technology we've been using for that is something like storytelling. Tell all
Hmm.
these stories, whether you trust that guy or that guy.
Strongly agreed.
Yeah. So is the outcome here that if we build this trustworthy AI, human trusts the intelligence system, then we can use it better? Is that the
Yeah.
outcome?
So the you mentioned, and I think the way we're discussing these things is there are two parts of the story, which is the human part,
Mhm.
human society, that whole bit, which includes things like governance and policymaking, right?
Yep.
So part of trust is people who use, to some extent, trust in institutions that
Mhm.
decide for them. You can walk into any grocery store now in most places in the world and buy food off the shelf and have some reasonable confidence that you're not going to die by eating that food. We don't think about it now because it's ubiquitous, but this is a consequence of regulation that has ensured food safety
Mhm.
where it's now invisible
Yep.
because there's a whole
Yep.
process that just made measuring potential for risk in food and processes
Mhm.
across the industry to make sure that food systems are safer.
Safe. Yep.
So similar thing with technology, technology systems in general. So there's the human part, there's the technology part. We don't have agency necessarily, or at least the mandate of my group is not to try to solve the human part. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what we are hoping to do is to make progress on the technology part so that it's easier to, you know, for us maybe as partners, but really like broader society to solve the technology part. So we
Got
want
it.
to build tooling into AI systems so that it's easier for society to trust them. What are you
Mm-hmm.
looking for? You're worried
Mm-hmm.
about mistakes that systems make. So, the easiest way to lose trust of technology system is that you expect it to solve something. You have some prediction of, yeah, it can solve this task, and then it does something wrong.
There's something else. Yeah.
Immediately you lose trust, and that trust can be hard to get back.
Mm-hmm.
In policy making, governance cares about risks. They care about negative outcomes. They care
Yep.
about different behavior across different demographics. So there's fairness issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, ways to lose trust there is that you build systems that discriminate in various ways.
Yeah.
And so the way that technology can engage in this is that we can operationalize what it looks like to build systems that don't have that issue. We can both understand the risk of that kind of problem. We can build into technological tools mitigations for those kinds of issues. And we
Mm-hmm.
can research the outcomes on society. And so
Okay.
this is a way to you know, close some of the technological gap to engender trust. But again, it's a big social technical
Yeah, 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 yeah. Huge,
system.
huge
The
system.
place where we have agency is on, or at least
Yeah.
where my group focuses. There are other people
Mm-hmm.
that do some other parts of this, but my group focuses on what can we do on the technological side to make systems better so that they're worthy of
Yeah.
society's trust. And,
Society.
we try to provide tools for technologists. I've done a bunch of work trying to build tools that end up being deployed in clinical systems.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about companies and
Yep.
industrial systems. We provide tools for policymakers to engage and understand the systems that are being deployed in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Provide tools for folks in ethics and civil society broadly to understand what's going on in these systems.
Yeah.
So
And
our goal is to close the technical gap so that
yeah.
people can engage.
And we've talked about like your journey, right? From Austin to, research to industry, and now you're collaborating with industry. How did you get a sense of like, okay, this is what I want to do? Like,
Hmm.
or these are the things I want to do. Like, when did things become, when did they start becoming meaningful to, okay, I'm going to keep working on this and,
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Um, it's a mix of things, a few directions. One, it's meaningful. I think I was fortunate to have good foundations, at least for the kinds of work I'm doing on the technical side. I think, you can only sort of prepare yourself so much. There's so much of outcomes that depend on serendipity, luck,
uh
whatever you want to call it, that no matter how prepared you are and how you set up yourself, things happen, and it can go either way, really. And I think
hmm
I feel grateful that many of these things, at least the outcomes, have been such that
yeah.
they've come my way. So, along the way, I always leave space for unexpected conversations,
hmm
unexpected ideas. Lots of my success have been tied to people I know who are advocating for me in front of me, but also people I know from
hmm
the outcomes that people are advocating behind the scenes. Examples of this: you win academic prizes every once in a while. No one wins an academic prize if there isn't someone behind the scenes that
yeah,
right.
vouching and
And these things play such a big role in career success because
yeah.
most of the world that someone thinks you're doing good work, uh,
Yep.
they should be valued. No one gets a job without an advocate somewhere.
Mhm.
Good, right? I mean, at different levels of depending on the import or at least societal perspective on how important the job is, but
Yep.
no one's becoming faculty at Stanford without significant. I've seen how I've been on hiring committees in various
Mm.
ways. You need strong advocates that really believe in what you're doing. So I say all this to say, I guess I want to be very aware of how much of this is other people. I
Yeah.
mean, to that point, you can do a lot to put yourself in as good a position as possible. A lot of this is
Mhm.
preparation.
Yeah.
Others is sometimes serendipity of being open to some good ideas. So
Yeah.
specifically in this direction and some of my work. So I started off when I started my sort of technical career, I thought I would be doing I've actually shifted a fair amount, mostly in engineering, but all of my degrees are electrical engineering. I thought I'd be doing control systems because that was where I got initial research exposure in
Mm-hmm.
my undergrad.
We would have been doing like similar things
Yeah,
that I did the wrong.
that's true. I remember this. Um, and then I took a couple of classes in communication systems in
Mm.
my first year at University of Texas. And I got really excited about, I think I just had just good instructors as well. They got me excited about the area. So I ended up thinking I would do communication systems. I'm going to tell the story, but to give example
Mm-hmm.
of all these switches that I think would have been hard to predict from the outset, but I think I'm quite happy where they've landed.
Yeah.
Um, in the middle in communication systems, I got excited about what used to be called cognitive radios. It's still a thing. Is this idea that we can build intelligence into the way communication systems work? In
Mm-hmm.
particular, as you might know, you're running out of spectrum,
Yep.
radio width. And so, because so many things use Wi-Fi and
Yeah.
over-the-air communication, and at some point, the FCC had this initiative to allow some shared bandwidth, and so you need intelligence to allow you to switch automatically between different bands so that you're not interfering with other people. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was wireless comm, but also a bit of AI systems, like some predictive systems, some intelligent switching,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And weirdly, I got much more excited about the intelligence part than the radio part. And so then I started to research on machine learning and AI systems. And many things happened, but I ended up switching advisors and mostly focusing on
Mm-hmm.
that part of the work. I was doing the thing in vogue in the field at the time was various kinds of probabilistic machine learning. So spending a lot of time thinking about uncertainty and modeling uncertainty and things like that. So technical,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I walked into a random talk at some point late in my close to the end of my PhD
I
where
love the random
a
talks.
lot of it really was random. No, so in machine learning, uh, half a generation ago. So right now, all of the software tools, the most popular software tool are variations on Python tools.
Mm-hmm.
PyTorch is the main thing.
Yep.
Before PyTorch, which is for deep learning kinds of things, the
Yep.
main tool that people use was something called scikit-learn.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Yep.
it's actually the place that I still send most people to start their machine learning journey. It does pretty much everything but the deep learning stuff
Yeah.
you mostly do in this. It used to be called Scikit-learn. I forget. It had a different name, but at some point it became called Scikit-learn, which is this whole package that does a bunch of the basic machine learning, so predictive
Mm-hmm.
modeling, k-means, a bunch of the like nuts and bolts of the software tools for machine learning systems.
Yep.
And the lead researcher, the lead of the scikit-learn happened to be visiting Texas. It turned out that, so I went to go see his talk because I worked in machine learning. The lead of this tool that
Yep.
so much impact is around. It weirdly turns out that the people who build scikit-learn are mostly neuroscientists. It's weird because they're publishing machine learning as well. Neuroscience and machine learning used to be so much more coupled. In fact,
Yeah.
the conference NeurIPS, the neuro
Yep.
part is
The
neuroscience.
one that just
The
happened. Yep.
exactly. So it used to be much more coupled. It's not that surprising in retrospect, but
Mhm.
it does seem weird, I think, on the outset. And so I went to this talk and I stayed later to chat with the guy and ended up chatting with this neuroscience professor and got really fascinated about machine learning in neuroscience because they were talking about these open problems, and that ended up becoming this professor ended up being on my PhD committee. That
Wow.
became my postdoc advisor. Actually. So I went with him to Stanford. That's how I got into sort of this area of
Interesting.
human AI things.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And it became the core part of my research agenda for a few years. I went to Illinois in my research career. Students, random conversation with a colleague. We said, oh, let's get this student. The student turned out to be excellent in helping us think about things like distributed systems and a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
became a lot of what got me tenure at Illinois at the time was this
Interesting.
sort of, opening my
Yeah.
ability, this, I don't know, willingness to try some of these ideas. I got into healthcare. A lot of this happened because people just randomly pinged because I did a lot of neuroscience. And if you're far enough away from the computing side and you're looking for someone who knows machine learning things,
Mm-hmm.
is interested in humans,
Yep.
neuroscience and healthcare look the same from the outside. I ended
Mm-hmm.
up getting
Mm-hmm.
random pings. And at some point, I got this really fascinating reach out from a doctor. There's an article somewhere about this actually. They called it shot in the dark. It really was. The doctor randomly emailed. We were interested in something about chest X-rays and some radiology questions. I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. We end up collaborating. There's a patent with my name on it now that comes from this kind of thing. There's a bunch of these. I mean, again, there were foundations, but a huge impact from events that I could not have planned.
Yeah, no, not predicted. There's no model prediction for this one.
The company, again, random colleague reach out. We're working on this problem. We think you could be helpful. Like, okay, let me learn more about it. We ended up writing this paper that was probing trust and safety questions in AI systems. It ended up being the core of the company. The company itself, pivoted. We thought we'd be doing more like measurement and evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out the market was much more on guardrails and mitigation,
Address,
like
yeah.
trying to protect systems as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
gaps. And so, at least for me, the serendipity was this colleague reaching out and working on the sort of the original paper. Paper got some really good reception. Won a NeurIPS, this conference I talked about,
Yep.
the best paper award there. We got a best paper. I learned from the first time that the National Security Agency has a paper award. I had no idea that they had.
Okay.
They
Uh-huh.
have a security paper award. And I learned about this by getting an email that we won the cybersecurity award. So we read
Oh,
the
okay.
paper and we
Thanks.
thought it was exciting, and it was exciting enough for them. It's like, hey, this is so. We were the first to try to operationalize what trust and safety could look like
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
modern LLMs. And at the time, there
Yeah.
was a huge gap. People were worried, but didn't know how to measure, how to think about this. And so
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it became a big deal. And it's on Hugging Face.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of downloads. People are using it, so it
Oh,
became
nice.
a meaningful resource for the community. But again, could what I have predicted that this is the thing I'd be doing? I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Hey, you're telling the story, and it just reminds me of how I ended up in Austin. Like, I just finished my master's at Texas A&M, and
Yeah.
my professor was like, "Oh, go present this thing that you did at this process safety conference."
Yeah.
And it was the Hilton in College Station, the most random Hilton ever. And I was given a presentation and practiced so hard for this presentation, right? 2 slides in, the fire alarm goes off,
Wow.
right? And then, so I was like, oh man. And like I was nervous, but as soon as the fire alarm goes off, like I literally like slump my head and
Yeah,
everybody
because
starts laughing,
you're
right?
supposed
Everybody
to.
starts laughing. We kind of walk outside and I'm like standing in the corner, like practicing, going over my slides in my head. And this guy just comes up to me and is like, "Oh, I saw your 2 slides. That's exactly what we do at Rockwell. Well, it's a company
Wow.
called Pavilion. We have this neuro
That's
software. Da, 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 da." It was like, "Let's talk after the presentation." Dude, that's how I got my first job.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The most random, it was a fire
Yeah,
alarm.
from the
Yeah.
outside, right? Like, I mean, but you had to do the preparation. You had to have,
Yep. Exactly.
done the work. You had
Ex
to had prepared all this
exactly.
time for the
Yep.
presentation.
Yeah.
Quick.
2 more questions, right? All right. So, as an educator, right, when the students now can get answers instantly from Gen AI, what becomes the job of the educator?
You picked some of the hardest questions for these 5 minutes. No, this is a huge one. I think we've been thinking about this quite a bit. I mean, Stanford, any institution that thinks of itself as training people thinks a lot about this. I think even the best meaning students, the best students actually are usually the best students because they take on, I mean, okay, maybe not because they take on so much, but one correlate of a good student is they tend to do too much stuff. And so even if in the ideal world, they would be very thoughtful and very careful about exactly what they work on. 11 p.m. at night, homework is due tomorrow. I have 10 other things I'm looking to do. I can push this button on this AI system and it will do something for me that looks plausible. It's just very
Mhm.
hard to avoid that temptation and
Mhm.
just do it that way. In the short term, what has happened, I think assessment has changed. So, yeah, I mean, your question is different, which is like, what is the role? But
Mhm.
I can say very briefly, like, I think the things that are actually happening in education right now in the short term is, so we think of our role as training students to, be useful in the world, either in companies or in research. So
Yep.
innovation, and as a high level. And so, particularly at a place like Stanford, in addition, we literally think of our students as changing the world. And I
Mhm.
don't mean this in any, like, we just actually literally think that our
Yep.
students change the world. And so we're thinking about what do we train them for this? Like, what do we teach them for this to be the outcome? So I think the dynamics, yeah, it's a tricky space. I think the dynamics will go in. It's unclear like how the role of education might shift. I would
Mhm.
say though, it's never been purely content. If you talked a bit about why you went to Stanford
Yep.
earlier. Like, the actual thing you learned in a classroom, you could have learned at 50 other places,
Yep.
hundreds of other places.
Mhm.
You learn it online. You
Mhm.
don't need to be in a Stanford. But the thing you get from Stanford is this community and the social learning and the network and a bunch
Yeah.
of other extraneous things.
Yeah.
At least my sense is that that part of the educational process is not, it'll take longer for that and
To change.
I think probably be a loss, a net loss.
Mhm.
There's another conversation to have about, this tends to end up being really concentrated at quote unquote elite schools. So not
Mhm.
everyone has the opportunity when they go to different universities to get
Yep.
the thing about education that's not the literal in class learning, but so much of the experience. In fact, even before AI, the argument is always, the argument that's I found most compelling is that a lot of education really is the social process. Like it's
Yeah.
work with your colleagues, learn with your colleagues,
Mhm.
figure out how other people think, figure out how to explain things to other people, like a bunch of that thing that's not really captured in what goes on in the classroom is
Classroom.
often some of the most critical part of the education process.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think that part will change. I do think there's a lot of worry that the execution part of it, so the pain and suffering of not knowing something and having to work hard to learn that thing,
Mhm.
might go away. I worry that matters in both getting the muscle to do hard things and fail at them. I think that's important. But also, even if AI automates, we talked at the beginning about complex systems and experiments.
Mhm.
Even if AI automates a bunch of what it means to do valuable work, if you don't know how things work, when something breaks,
Yep.
you just won't know what to do.
Yep.
Maybe we can automate we talked about earlier, do I think there's a world where humans are not in the loop somewhere? Maybe I'm yet to see an example.
Mhm.
If we're training students and we're not training in such a way that they're building this muscle, I think it's a net loss for the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't have a good prediction.
Mhm.
I think there's still an important role, and it's always been more than the literal classroom. For sure, when MOOCs became a thing, you
Exactly.
always get the content online.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to get you off on this last you can make it very brief, right? So I've written a few science fiction books, right? There's a playful one. If the entire world went dystopian, right? Dystopian, the machines are taking control, we're a slave to the machines. Or utopian, they're doing our work, trustworthy AI, friendly AI. They're, taking care of all our needs, and we're just like, oh, what else is there to do? Right? There are these two worlds. You could choose either world that you want to live in. What would you do on a daily basis in either of the two worlds? So choose a world and then tell me what you do with your time.
Wow. So I'll choose Utopia because I
Okay.
think that seems better. I think, at least to the extent, I mean, for whatever it's worth, so much of our thinking is shaped by movies and narratives. And
Mhm.
kudos to authors for helping us visualize what both of these things could look like. But I think I'll take the lazy route, and I think I prefer to live in a utopia versus.
Yep.
I make no predictions about where the world will go. By the way, I don't think we
Mhm.
know, and I think it's too complex to make easy predictions about.
Yeah.
That said, I hope that if I was in a utopia, this will free up my intellectual time to do
Mhm.
parts of what I love doing, which is, again, I think being a researcher, the parts of my time that a researcher are it's such a lucky thing to have as part of my job that like I'm
Mhm.
expected to think broadly and think creatively and explore as a way.
Yep.
This is the thing I'm paid for, and I
Mhm.
can help other people and train other people to do this as
Yeah.
like a way of life. And I think it's one of those things that may be proof, like what's called future proof in a utopia anyway.
Mhm.
Much less so in a dystopia.
Yeah, yeah, my dystopia. You're trying to find food.
Maybe research is no longer that, or open-ended thinking is not that interesting.
Yeah.
But in a utopia, I think it will be a good fit, and yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what I'd hope to be able to do.
Nice, nice, nice. Sanmi Koyejo, thank you very much for your time. I really
Real pleasure.
appreciate you. It was very nice talking to you, and Hope you have a good day. Enjoy the rest of
Thank you
your
very much.
day.